Hello, I'm Rico Caviglia, and this is your Ageless Body Self-Care Guide. It's the operations manual for your body and for your mind. And the title of today's session is Binge and Overeating Solutions: How to Reprogram Yourself to Think Like a Permanently Thin Person. So I think this is going to be a real beneficial session. I know there's so many people struggling with this, and probably most of us have at one time or another, at least temporarily. So this is going to be something that's going to be real valuable. So really, pay attention here. So we have a great expert. His name is Dr. Glenn Livingston. He's a formerly obese psychologist and author who spent years working for the food industry in addition to seeing patients. And he finally developed solutions for himself and for his patients. So Dr. Glenn Livingston, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted.
Oh yeah, well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. So let's get right into it. So why do you think that we have such a problem with overeating and binge eating, and why it's so prevalent in our culture today?
Well, I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think that the big food industry and the big advertising industry, and to some extent the treatment industry, is manufacturing a perfect storm that makes it possible for everyone to overeat. I think that the big food industry has put billions of dollars into engineering these hyper palatable concentrations of starch, sugar, and fat, and oil, and excitotoxins in the smallest package possible. And it's targeted at hitting our bliss point in the reptilian brain, the seat of the feast and famine response, without giving enough nutrition to feel satisfied. I think the big advertising industry is very effective at making us believe we need these things to survive. And I think that there is some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache laughing all the way to the bank every time that we're looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container. And then I also think that the treatment industry is claiming that we can't control ourselves even if we wanted to, that there's some mysterious progressive disease that prevents us from quitting certain things, and the best we could do is abstain one day at a time. And there's not really evidence for that. So I think you put it all together and it's a perfect storm. There's a lot of profit incentive involved, and the populace wants to be lied to. I mean, people like good news about their bad habits. They want to believe that if you have potato chips with vitamin E in it, that it's better for you somehow. And maybe it is a speck better, but I think it's a perfect storm, and capitalism doesn't protect you against those types of excesses. So that's why I think everybody's in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. Unfortunately, it's all about the money. We don't, too many big companies, corporations, that they don't produce things of value that have concern for people's health or the environmental health. All they care about is their bottom line, how much money they're going to make. I think in addition to that too, is there the factor of stress? We live in such a fast-paced, stressful situation that so many people feel so stressed out. So I think people, in order to calm themselves down, they tend to get into the comfort foods and overeat. What do you think that's a big factor as well?
I think that overeating tends to divert blood to the digestive system and to the process of flushing toxins from the system that don't really belong in there. And when the body is busy doing that, it's harder for the neurological system to process emotion. I think that most people understand this as eating for comfort, when in fact there are two things going on. On one level, we get upset and we turn to the bagel or the chocolate or the bag of chips, and we feel anesthetized, and we're not really thinking about our feelings after we're eating that stuff. But on another level, we're actually getting high with food. They didn't have potato chips on the savannah. They didn't have chocolate bars on the savannah. These are unnaturally concentrated forms of pleasure, and they divert our survival drives away from where they're really supposed to be. And they make us believe that we really need these things to survive, and we don't. Worse than that, there's a process called downregulation, which means that when you have a chocolate bar every day, for example, you're overstimulating the pleasure centers of the brain and the pleasure centers in your taste buds, and your body responds by down-regulating the pleasure response. Just like if you sleep underneath the subway, after a day or so, you don't even hear it, or maybe a couple of weeks, because your nervous system had to downregulate. It couldn't survive otherwise. And so people feel like fruit and vegetables don't taste sweet anymore. They could never enjoy eating healthy. Everybody kind of knows that if you're going to get healthy, you're going to have to eat more fruit and vegetables and not all these bags and boxes and containers. And so they're eating to get high with food. Eventually, they're just eating to feel normal because they've downregulated so far that they're not getting pleasure elsewhere. And then the last thing is that the information out there about recovery suggests that you should eat well 90% of the time and eat badly 10% of the time. Like anything in moderation is okay. And it's not really good advice because it requires you to make constant decisions about when is a 90% and when is a 10%. If I'm sitting at Starbucks and there's a chocolate bar on the counter that's calling my name, is this part of my 10% of the time or is this part of my 90% of the time? And that wears down your willpower, making those constant food decisions. So it's better to create hard and fast rules. Like if you only have chocolate on Saturdays or only the last 3 days of the month or something like that, then your chocolate decisions will have been made and you're not wearing down your willpower all the time.
Wow, such good points. Yeah, thank you for that. That was really good. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit before we get into some of the solutions that you came up with and how people can learn how to get over these addictions of overeating and binge eating. So let's just briefly talk a little bit about what are some of the main health problems that really are linked to overeating and eating all these highly processed foods.
Well, I'm not a medical doctor or a registered dietitian, so I'm not the best expert to be speaking on that. I can tell you personally that my triglycerides were over 1,000 when I was 70 pounds heavier, eating pizza and Pop-Tarts and Doritos and chips all the time. Chocolate really more than anything else. The diet reversible diseases out there include cardiovascular disease, some forms of cancer, diabetes, really horrendous forms not only of death but of lower quality of life as we get older. Don't necessarily have to go like that. You can teach yourself to eat healthy, and you don't really have to have you don't have to have anywhere near as high an odds of suffering with those diseases as most people think that you do in old age. You don't have to have anywhere near as high of an odds of living on the medications and the side effects of the medication as you think you do. A lot of these things are preventable. Some things aren't. There's some, like I don't have any miracles, but I'm 56 years old and I'm pretty darn healthy, eating healthy and exercising and taking care of myself. So, I think there's all sorts of promise for cleaning up your diet and eating healthy that most people kind of know in the back of their mind, but they don't think it's possible.
Well, being a psychologist, talk just a little bit about the psychology of eating. I guess we're not really taught when we begin to eat that the reason that we eat is, for energy and to create good health. It's not that we shouldn't be eating for pleasure as well, but that's becoming into the forefront. Instead of realizing what we're eating is so that we can function well and we have energy and we can feel good. So talk just a little bit about the psychology of eating.
I think that what most people don't understand is that if you have a set of bad feelings and then you eat some junk, so let's say like I eat a whole pizza when I'm feeling really anxious. Well, the anxiety goes away temporarily, but it actually is reinforced in the long run. Let's look at anxiety in particular. When you take an animal and you monitor it for respiration and heart rate and blood pressure and some of the correlates of anxiety and stress, and if you give it some sugary treat every time that those numbers go up, do you know that animal will become conditioned to raise its anxiety level, to raise its blood pressure and respiration, and in some cases perspiration and heartbeat. And most people think that the pizza would be associated with the anxiety going down. What you're actually doing is you're raising your overall anxiety level, and then it goes down for a little bit when you have the pizza, then it goes back up. Whereas if you didn't have the pizza, you'd be down here to start with. So there's the behavioral psychology of just strictly how things are reinforced. Those are called the principles of operant conditioning. There are associated traumas with particular types of foods. Like I did this large study a long time ago with 40,000 people, and I found that people that struggle with chocolate, they tend to be lonely or depressed or brokenhearted, and people that struggle with starch and bread and bagels and pasta and things like that, they tend to be stressed at home, and people who struggle with chips and crunchy salty things, they tend to be stressed at work.
all those things. Yeah.
But I find that information is not as useful. What's more useful is drawing a really clear line of where your personal bullseye is. Most people are aiming at a fuzzy target. Eat well 90% of the time, don't eat well 10% of the time. I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, I'm going to stop when I'm full, I'm going to I'm going to eat as if I was eating in front of people all the time and not going to hide things. Those are all good ideas. They're good North Stars or guidelines to shoot for, but it leaves the bullseye a little bit fuzzy. And with a fuzzy target, you don't really know when you've missed and by how much you've missed and in what direction to make the change. Whereas if I say that I'll only ever have chocolate on Saturdays, and I made it to Friday, I know that I was pretty close and I can make some minor adjustments and I'd probably be okay. Right? You can also tell more clearly when a thought is constructive or destructive if you make those clear boundaries. So if I say I'll never have chocolate except for Saturdays again, and then I'm at Starbucks on a Wednesday and I hear a voice in my head that says, you worked out hard enough, it's not going to matter, you won't gain any weight, you might as well just start again tomorrow. I can say, wait a minute, that goes against the rule that I set up when I was of sound mind and body and I had my best thinking hat on. And so I say that that's my inner food monster. That's my reptilian brain talking to me. And then I look for, that's my cue that there is something going on that I don't want to be going on, that in some way the feast and famine survival mode has been activated that says, forget about all your best laid plans and just hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt. So I will say that. And then that's my cue to take a breath. And I like to breathe in for a count of 7 and breathe out for a count of 11, because that kind of switches your nervous system from urgent action to resting and digestion and thinking and planning. It moves the battleground from the lower brain to the upper brain. And then I carry around something to write with, and I'll write down exactly what my food monster is saying. You might as well start again tomorrow. It'll be just as easy. You're not going to gain any weight. And I'll say, well, first of all, that's not true. The principles of neuroplasticity suggest that if I have a craving and I reinforce that craving by indulging the craving, that I'm going to have a harder time tomorrow digging myself out of that hole because the craving is going to be stronger, not an easier time. So it's not even true that it's just going to be as easy to start tomorrow. Secondly, I might gain weight because one of the things that I discovered over the years was that you can't really outrun a bad diet. So I would.
That's a good term.
Yeah.
I like that.
I got that from a client the other day.
Yeah.
I would climb a 6,000-foot mountain and then I'd eat 7,000 calories.
Eat a 7,000-foot mountain, right? Yeah.
I would find it like, yeah. So I would wind up eating 7,000 calories and I would gain weight anyway. And you can't outrun a bad diet.
Right.
So with that protocol for clearly identifying what are constructive versus destructive thoughts about food, clearly identifying healthy versus unhealthy behavior. What's my goal? What's my personal bullseye? I don't hit it 100% of the time, all the time, but I do aim with perfection. When I'm aiming at the bullseye, I purge my mind of doubt and insecurity, and I say, I can see the arrow going into the target before I let go of it. So I'm not thinking maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. I'm saying that's my bullseye, and I'm going to hit it. God, excuse my language. And then being able to have those clear signals that something's wrong with my thinking at that moment, and knowing that I have to engage in a routine to calm down and move out of emergency mode. And then once I've done that and I've disempowered the illogical thought, you can just start tomorrow. No, I can't. Once I've done that, then I ask myself, what do I really need to eat? Like, am I genuinely hungry? Sometimes it's just an emotional hunger and I need to go take a break or call a friend or go get a hug or something. But a lot of times I have a genuine biological hunger, and maybe I need a banana kale smoothie, or maybe I need to go have a big salad or a piece of fruit or something like that. It's usually salad and fruit for me that calms me down, sometimes some beans. And so that whole protocol with some very practical, specific, very simple and primitive things to do I found it's much more effective than trying to figure out, well, why am I feeling lonely and depressed right now, and where does that come from? I could tell you where it comes from. When I was 1 year old, my father was a captain. They were talking about sending him to Vietnam. My grandfather had just gotten out of jail. My mother was totally overwhelmed, and she didn't have the wherewithal to feed me the way that she needed to. And so she kept a big bottle of Bosco chocolate syrup in a refrigerator on the floor. And when I come running to her for a hug or for some healthy food, she would say, go get your Bosco. And I'd run over to the refrigerator and I'd take out the bottle and I'd go into a chocolate sugar coma. That's where it comes from. The moment I figured that out, Mom and I had a big hug, and we kind of forgave each other. And it was helpful to me emotionally and soulfully. I could forgive myself and forgive her. I learned a lot about her and a lot about myself from that conversation, but it didn't really help with the food. It didn't help. That's why I evolved all these very practical things to do instead.
Yeah, I think that's really good points. I think a lot of people can identify with that. They've had kind of similar, they've had similar things happening in their life. So I think your point is, you got to let go of the past. Don't worry about why it happened or do all this. But right now, that you can take control of yourself, you can reprogram yourself to think like as you said, like a thinner person or a person that's more health conscious and healthy. So can you kind of so when you do get a craving, can you kind of summarize it now for our viewers?
Yeah, sure.
The steps that you take?
I get a craving.
Okay.
I pause. I take a deep breath. I count in for 7 and out for 11. It's called the 7-11 breath. And I learned that from Laurie Hammond, who was a hypnotist that taught me. In for 7, out for 11. Then when I feel just a tiny bit calmer, I take out a piece of paper and a pen, or I just write on my smartphone on a note. Why does my food monster want me to cross the line right now? And there could be all kinds of reasons. The one example I gave was, you can just start tomorrow. It'll be just as easy. Then I ask myself, how is the food monster wrong? How is it wrong? How is it lying to me? Well, it's not just as easy to start tomorrow because of all the principles I talked to you. And I'll actually write that out to remind myself of it. The act of writing in the first place is an upper brain activity. So it takes you out of that feast and famine emergency mode.
Really good.
Then I ask myself, do I feel calm about this now? Am I hungry for anything in particular? What's the authentic need? Is it an emotional need? Is it a physiological need? I look at the physiological needs first, because I'm assuming there's a biological error, and my experience working with thousands of people at this point is that people have the hardest time resisting those thoughts when they're genuinely hungry. They've let their blood sugar go too low, or they've let their nutrition go too low. Maybe they've got enough blood sugar, but they don't have the nutrition that they need. And the more that I gravitate towards flooding my body with nutrition at a maintenance level or a slight caloric deficit if I want to take off a couple of pounds, then the easier it is to deal with those moments. Once that's all done, then I'll say, do I feel calmer? And how would making the healthy choice right now make me a happier, better person? So I've done a lot of thinking to figure out, well, why don't I want to have chocolate during the week? And it's because I want to walk in the world as a healthy, confident, thin man. And I want to climb mountains, and I want to be confident in a love relationship, and I want to be a leader, and I want to have energy and good digestion and good sleep, and be able to play with my niece and my nephew, and all those kinds of things. And so I'm constantly linking that better choice to the kind of person that I'm becoming. Because you don't want to white knuckle it and have to go through this procedure for 20 years.
Yeah.
You want to work on it for a couple of months and then just make it a part of you. If I ask most people, could you give up chocolate forever? They'll say, no, I could never do that. And then I'll say, well, let me rephrase that. You think you could become a person who doesn't eat chocolate? And they'll go, oh, maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I could, because there are people that don't eat chocolate. Maybe I could do that, right? And that's coincidentally what's happened to me. I don't have a rule about chocolate on my plan anymore. I evolved from only during the week to never having it after about 6 different tries to do it in different ways. And then eventually I just got used to not having it. I didn't have the cravings anymore. The chocolate bar looked like a big bag of chemicals to me. And I took the rule off because I didn't need it. I just became a person that doesn't have chocolate. That's it.
That is so good. That's such good points. I really appreciate that. That's so good.
Sure.
I just want to add a couple of little minor-ish things too. You know, sometimes when you think you're hungry, you're really just thirsty, you know? So
Yeah.
drink some water. And then the other point is you got to have the food that you know that's the food that you want to eat and you need to eat in your house. You can't have bags of chips and candy bars laying around in your house, you know, then you're going to eat them. So you got to get the junk out of your house and you got to have the food. So as you said, sometimes you generally are hungry or your blood sugar's down. In that case, well then eat something that of value. Eat an apple or, you know, eat something that's healthy for you. Yeah, that's such a good thing. I think that's going to help really a heck of a lot of people. Well, I want to remind all of our viewers that you're getting some really good tips and some really good things that you can start to do right now that really make a big difference. But we really encourage you to stay in contact with all of our experts. And like Dr. Glenn, this training comes with a PDF. It has the transcription so you can read it. And it also has all Dr. Glenn's contact information. I know he has a lot more information on his website. Most of our experts have some gifts for you or some offers, and they offer some coaching or some counseling. So if you need more help, be sure and connect with Dr. Glenn. I know that'll be really helpful for you. And so, Glenn, the last question is, it's the hardest one I always ask all my experts is, what ideas do you have that maybe you could even more so help to inspire and motivate our viewers to actually begin taking action on your recommendations? It's one thing to say, oh yeah, I see that. Okay, that's good. But then to get them to actually do it, it's another thing, right?
So start with one simple rule. Most times your food monster tries to get you to set the bar too high. There's this old nursery rhyme that said, when she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was horrid. And that's how most people live their lives in the dieting world. They're either restricting and dieting or they're overindulging and binging. Yeah. And what you want to do is get off that feast and famine roller coaster and start to, the process for getting off that feast and famine roller coaster is to start with a very low bar. Maybe you don't worry about losing weight right away unless the doctor says it's urgent. And you come up with one simple rule, just so you know how the game is played. Like, I'll always put my fork down between bites, or I'll never eat in front of a screen again, or I'll only ever eat pretzels at a Major League Baseball game. Come up with one simple rule. I knew a guy who lost 150 pounds, starting with the one rule that he won't go back for seconds. He was a trucker. And he was eating on the road all the time, always eating fast food. And he says, I'm not going to give up my fast food, but I won't go back for seconds. Now, that's not all he did, but that started the truck rolling in the right direction, if you'll excuse the pun. Yeah. So come up with one simple rule. And if you all, people whose ear I am in right now, if you all take a breath and ask yourselves, what's one simple thing you can do that's not too onerous, but would really make a difference? Something you could and would do, it would really make a difference. Everybody knows how they're effing up. Everybody knows the biggest thing they could do that would make a big difference. Yeah. And do an experiment with that one simple rule for 30 days. See what happens. As soon as you lay down the one simple rule, there's going to be this other part of your brain that says, You can't do that. You failed 1,000 times before. You're never going to be able to do this now. Who are you kidding? This is ridiculous. You don't have the willpower. Start to write those things down and then ask yourself, how is it lying? By the way, when that voice says you failed 1,000 times before, you can't do this now, what it's saying is that you're less likely to be able to do it because of all the failures behind you. But that's not what the research says. When you look at the research on people who lose weight and keep it off for 5 years or more, the way that they differ from people who yo-yo diet is largely by the number of attempts they have behind them. So it looks like the path of success is through failure. The more you failed in the past, the more likely you are to succeed going forward.
Wow, that's just good information.
Yeah.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn. That was so good. I think that's really helpful. It's going to help a lot of people. So I think the main message is here is that you can do it no matter how many times you failed in the past or how much you beat yourself up. You can do it. Dr. Glenn did it. His patients are doing it. A lot of people are doing it. So the message is you can do it. You just got to step up and take the first step and just, as the old Nike saying, just do it, and you can do it. And also, I just want to, that last thing I want to add is that I promise you, when you begin to take the advice of not only Dr. Glenn, but all of our experts in this program, I guarantee that you're going to be able to greatly improve your overall health and well-being. You just have to get started and start doing it, and you'll get the results that you desire.
You could live the balance of your life as a different person than you lived the first part of your life.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Never binge again is where they go. If they
never binge again. That's right. Well, all the contact information there. Yeah, they'll know how to get a hold of you.
Okay.
So thanks very much for being here, Dr. Glenn, and thanks to all of our viewers. And again, just get out and you can do it.